Yeah.
Well, Carlos, I want to appreciate it and thank you very much for joining us today. And like we do, we just jump right into things. So I like to kind of casually kick her off and then we just jump right in and go right at it. So welcome to Ask an Angel. Thank you very much for joining us. And to the audience, as they know that you're in Mexico, in Mexico City, and very excited at the opportunity to dive into and learn more about the ecosystem and everything that's going on in Mexico. But the first and the easiest way for us to start is maybe you could give us a little bit more on your background. So where you've come from, what you've been up to, where you are now, and then where you're looking to go. So kind of that easy lifeline. And then one thing about you that nobody would know.
Great. Thanks, Jeffrey, for having us here. So a little background on myself. I come from, the traditional finance industry, worked in corporate banking at HSBC here in Mexico, then worked for a fund focused on sustainable projects, particularly in water and energy projects here in Mexico. Then I continued my professional journey in corporate banking at a regional bank that's one of the leading digital banks right now in Mexico. Then I decided to do my MBA in the US with a focus on private equity and venture capital. And after my MBA, I worked for the venture arm of a family office in Boston that wanted to tap into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And then I returned to Mexico and joined as investor and director of finance for a fintech startup that provides loan to the underserved SME market in Mexico. And that's when we realized that there was a gap in this early stage funding ecosystem in fintech particularly as well. So that's when we decided to set up AMG Block, which is a seed stage VC fund focused on fintech in Mexico and Spanish-speaking LATAM. Fintech we see it across different business verticals, payments, loans, wealth management, insurtech, blockchain. We believe technology will play a key role in financial inclusion in the region, and blockchain is definitely one of the technologies within our scope. So that's sort of the brief overview on how we got here, and something that most people don't know about me is so both my parents are from Peru. So my parents, they met in Peru, got married in Peru, and then came here to Mexico over 40 years ago. So I was born and raised here, but I have like a strong connection to other, Latin American cultures, and that's obviously one of the reasons that we're also looking to expand sort of the Latin American opportunity through the fund.
I love it. I'm a big fan of Peru. I spent some time traveling through there. I've gone through lots of countries in Latin America, Central America. Big fan of, I guess you can say, the Spanish culture and the Spanish-speaking countries. But Peru was quite fun. I did some trekking through there and climbed your only mountain that's big in Peru, I guess. So that was fun. And overall, it's a great experience and a lot of great people. But of course, Mexico is just as amazing too. As we talked before, I'm a huge fan of Mexico City. It's so active and crazy big that you can just get lost walking around there for 5 minutes and not know where you started. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's so it's similar to New York and LA combined. So big. But you have some like clusters around the city. You have to know where to move around and everything. But overall, it's a great place to visit. Culturally, gastronomically, it's amazing. So yeah, I'm glad you've been a part of Latin America for a while.
Yeah, big fan. I've been there a few times. Just from a side fact standpoint, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Mexico City in the last 10 years has sunk more than 3 inches. In the last 3 years, in the last 10 years, the entire city has dropped that much.
So primarily the city center, it was built on top of a lake. So when you go to the city center, you'll see some buildings that are, below ground level. I'm not sure about how much every year we sink, but we will continue sinking for a while, you know?
Yeah, they were saying that it's something that they can't control. So they were actually considering at some point building another city to offset the weight of everything that was going on in Mexico City and to see if they could rebuild it in a different fashion because of it. I think it was because it would screw up the aquifers and everything else that's running in the city at some point in time.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamics that we have here, and that's one of the peculiarities when we had some of these earthquakes, right? At the city center. I mean, if you're there, which all the buildings are built on top of the water, right? You have a lot of movement. So whenever we have an earthquake here, that's why it's so chaotic. But I mean, we have the pros and cons of living in Mexico City, you know?
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. So I kind of want to dive back into your past because I find that a lot of what we've done gets us to where we are today. And you spend some time working in the banking side, and of course, oddly enough, you're investing in fintech and blockchain. So I'm sure there has to be some coincidence that's occurred there. But in that process, can you give us an idea of what that experience really detailed? Because the banking side, being in numbers, it really does drive home what every startup needs to focus on, which is understanding their business modeling, how their financial models are working, and how they can drive and make money in sales. So maybe a little bit more on how you kind of explored that banking side and how valuable was that before you went in and did your MBA?
Yeah, I mean, the banking sector, I'd say, in Mexico and in Latin America, it's a little different than in other, more developed markets. I mean, when I had an opportunity to work in traditional finance, I mean, we focused mostly on the 2%, right, of the SME market, for instance. So there is a huge, opportunity to provide financial services and solutions to the underbanked population, to the underserved SME market, and that's something that the fintech sector has been focused on, right? I mean, when you look at sort of the statistics in Mexico alone, less than 50% of the population is banked, right? So, but we have a lot of smartphone penetration, right? So this, technology definitely plays a role in reaching these unbanked populations and providing the services that the traditional finance institutions don't provide, either because it's too costly, it's too much of a hassle, right? Or they just don't think it's makes sense business-wise, right? So I mean, it's definitely an interesting ecosystem, and one that particularly fintech companies across different business verticals are trying to solve.
And are you finding that with that experience and then going to the US and experiencing the MBA, that's kind of shifted your mindset on how these banks were operating? And maybe the time you were like, this seems reasonable, and then you're in the US, you're like, this is terrible. We need to get back there and correct this.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough, obviously, to experience that whole experience of living out in the US, right? And it's interesting, right? I mean, you have these one-click solutions. When you go out and have lunch with friends, you Venmo them, and everything's settled, right? And pretty much the entire, financial railways are already set in the US. But I experienced personally, so I was trying to transfer money from my Mexican account to my US account, and it took probably around 2 months. And at what point I was like, I don't know where my money is, because it wasn't the same bank that I was using. So obviously there's a triangulation in the transfer of funds. And I had to contact my local bank, my US bank, and none of them were able to tell me where my money was, right? I mean, at one point it was probably somewhere in Europe because they were triangulating my transfer. And these type of problems, I mean, could be, solved relatively easier with technology, right? I mean, blockchain technology obviously plays a huge role there, but the traditional sort of railways are obviously poised for disruption, right? And that's, that experience of being able to, do my everyday banking in a seamless way wasn't something that I used to experience when I was back in Mexico. And it's something that to this day, I don't experience, right? I mean, right now, if you wanted to open a business account, you have to go to a branch, have to go through their entire KYC process, and all of that could take probably a month or two, right? And if within your company, say, business purposes, the bank identifies something that they are not familiar with, then you'll go through a different KYC process that's going to take you 3 or 4 months to just open an account, right? So that obviously hinders the ability of startups to start operating relatively easy, so I mean, it's definitely a space that's going to change in the next few years, and we believe technology will definitely play a huge role there.
And do you find that what's the main catalyst for banks in other countries not to accept this form of change, or to accept that there is better, faster ways to transfer funds or to make things happen? Is it just a laissez-faire style attitude of employees, or is it the aggressive side that they don't match that aggressive outcome that European banks or North American banks are pushing? Like, what's the downside? And there's obviously a lot of upside.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. I mean, one of the main ones being obviously the costs involved, the sunk costs, right? I mean, these traditional banking systems have already, deployed a lot of money to build the railways that they're currently operating, right? So they don't want to just discard all of these investments made because there's a new technology that's, going to change the way they operate. Another aspect is the educational gap, right? I mean, when this is a funny story in Mexico, the new fintech law, which was put into place a couple of years ago, initially contemplated regulating virtual assets, right? So obviously behind virtual assets, you have blockchain technology. But when in 2018, when the government entities had a huge change, and the new governor of the Central Bank of Mexico came out and said, blockchain is too complicated for us. We're just going to put it on a sandbox environment and not regulate right now the virtual asset environment, right? So that lack of understanding of technologies or the potential that new technologies coming out to the market could have on the banking system is definitely an entry barrier for them to adopt, right? But we've seen changes. I mean, when you look at, for instance, Italy, over I think 80 banks are currently exploring, working with blockchain technology to have a more seamless banking experience in the country. There's innovation going on, but it's gonna take some time, I'd say.
So do you find that the banks are spending, because it has to do with currency and finance, do you think most of the time that the banks are trying to regulate internally fraud as they are externally fraud? So it's kind of a tough way to change the model or change the ship. So it opens up for opportunities for people to kind of take and bring in new startups to bring in new customers and to manage them, and a bank to just buy a company versus spending their time trying to manage and regulate their own staff. Because I'm sure fraud, and I've heard many stories, is pretty prevalent even inside the bank, because when you're around money, I'm sure that there's problems. And then when you're on the outside, there's obviously just as much fraud. So do you think it's more of the fact that it's been, or part of the problem is that it's been around for so long that they haven't been able to just get ahead of the problem, and that the problem is just built up so significantly that they can't keep up and change it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a combination of factors. I mean, obviously the time required to train the people inside, to train the people outside as well. I mean, as a customer, you want the whole experience to be as seamless as possible, right? But the banks have to, and not only banks, I mean, the entire, I'd say, finance industry has to take the necessary measures to avoid this type of frauds, right? I mean, we see it in not only on the traditional finance industry, but in crypto as well. I mean, the whole ICO boom proved to be, that a lot of companies were, frauds or didn't say or did what they set out to do, right? So a lot of money was lost. Why? Because there was a lack of, KYC or AML practices, or even a due diligence from part of the, the investors, right? Or those that participated in all of these ICOs. So, it's a combination of factors. I mean, like you said, I mean, if you work internally at a bank, you'll always have that, temptation to say it in some way, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's a financial educational process that has to go not only inside but outside the traditional finance industry.
And how much of, kind of currently now and now that you've jumped into working on your own fund and building this up, how much of that experience that you've gone through working in the banks is aligning up to how you make investments? Is it helping? Is it something that you're utilizing as, thank God I have this because I wouldn't be doing this because it's so complicated on how banks treat customers, how banks treat startups, how we treat startups, and then how blockchain can fit into this? It's so new. So how have you kind of evaluated that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, having the opportunity to work, inside a bank, you get to know sort of the opportunities and challenges that, internally you encounter, right? So all of these startups trying to focus on solving some of these issues are definitely an opportunity and something that we take a closer look, right? Because why? We've been there, we've lived it, right? Whenever we see, a startup trying to solve a problem that we personally experienced, it just makes, sense to consider it as part of the portfolio itself, So yeah, it's that opportunity to have the operational side of the business certainly gives us an inner edge, I'd say, when evaluating some of the startups working around some of these solutions.
I love it. No, it plays a big part. It builds credibility for the fund that you're building, that you've got this experience, and you're investing in fintech, which is pretty prevalent. And if you can't see the problem, you're probably not going to make the investment, because a lot of the times, and correct me if you see this different, but a lot of startups tend to build something that they think is a problem, but indirectly no one else does. So they end up spending a lot of time, effort, and money, and they haven't got market fit. So a lot of times you run into that issue where, hey, I built this great product, but I can't seem to sell it through, and maybe it wasn't validated properly. And maybe you're able to catch a lot of that in that blockchain and fintech space.
Yeah, and it's something that happens in not only in the fintech space, in the other industries as well. A lot of startups start building a solution and then try to find the problem, right? Which doesn't really make sense in depending on what sector or geography you're operating, right? But yeah, it definitely gives us, I'd say, a bit of an edge, having been through that specific problem ourselves.
I like it. Is there any specific area right now that's going on in Mexico that's kind of a hotbed? I know in the past few years there was, you're getting into regulator systems and things that are trying to, a lot of the banks will feed into one area so that they can all learn from the different fraud things that are occurring. I don't know if that's a global fix for every bank, but I'm assuming some banks are way more cutting edge and way more ahead of the curve than other banks. So are there things that are really hot and prevalent in Mexico and in Latin America where startups are really popping up, focusing on these specific areas in the domain that you're servicing?
Yeah, so right now, payments is obviously a huge, opportunity. I mean, when you look at, for instance, the remittance market, this corridor between the US and Mexico is one of the biggest in the world, but it's an old process, right? When people in the US send money back home, the commissions are upwards to 10%, right? So and the average amount is $300. So if you send $300 and they take $30 right out of the bat, I mean, there's obviously a problem there, and a lot of startups are trying to solve that. I mean, the issue here is you have such traditional legacy institutions like, you know, Western Union, which they're trying to innovate in the space, but it's not going to be that easy to move them aside, right? So payments obviously represents a huge opportunity, and it's an entryway also to bank the unbanked, right? I mean, once you provide, you know, a payment railway, you can start offering different financial services like, you know, loans, credit cards, even insurance. I mean, insurance represents a huge opportunity in LATAM as a whole, where most people don't even own any type of insurance, right? So that's one particular sector where there's a lot of innovations, a lot of startups trying to operate to solve some of the problems. And it's one of the business verticals in Mexico, at least, that currently falls within the fintech law. So that also provides, you know, a lot of certainty to the investors and the entire stakeholders in the payment ecosystem, right? Because they're operating under a regulated entity. So that's one of the sectors that's definitely been growing the past few years. Loans, you know, represents a huge opportunity. I mean, going back to what I was saying about, you know, working banks. I mean, in Mexico, 98% of the GDP comes from, you know, SMEs, and it's a sector that's underserved by the traditional finance industry. So SMEs have to look for alternative means of financing, and obviously a lot of these new fintech solutions provide these alternative resources, right? Wealth management is definitely an interesting space. I mean, the investment culture in Mexico right now is not that common. But, you know, these new generations of millennials that are more digital adept are looking for, you know, solutions or easy manners to actually invest some of their income. So there are a few players working around that specific space. Yeah, that's you know, some of the hot industries right now. Obviously, there are other business verticals that will definitely play a key role, like you said, identity management, enterprise resource management, you know, a blockchain. I mean, going back to part of our specific, I mean, crypto is a huge use case right now in Latin America as a whole. You know, in countries like Argentina, Venezuela, that given the macroeconomic environment that they're experiencing, they look at crypto as a store of value, right? And they have to go through a centralized entity like the exchanges to get access to this type of store of value as Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? So that's also, I mean, falls within fintech, you know, the use of blockchain technology and crypto as a whole. DeFi is another interesting space. A lot of the innovation going out outside of Latin America, but a lot of users in Latin America, right? So yeah, it's definitely exciting times to be in the space right now.
Well, you've got a massive population that you're feeding, right? And one of the interesting things you mentioned was that 50% of, I don't know if it's just in Mexico or it was in LATAM, that don't have bank accounts. So how does the fintech space start to attack that? Is it, you mentioned the mobile phone, that's pretty prevalent, and in other countries, in India, they're having this face with the same problem, in Africa, as a whole continent. They're all kind of going through the same change, but they're using, you know, maybe mobile phone, like tap phones, to kind of solve some of those immediate problems. What types of businesses are trying to tackle the unbankable, and are they trying to convert them into banking? And is it worth the effort, or I'm assuming that means if they're unbankable, they're untaxable. So is there really a value that you're even trying to drive out of that populace, even though it's a massive number of people?
Yeah, I mean, is it profitable or worth it? I mean, just look at Nubank, right? Nubank from Brazil, they currently have around 30 million users, I think, and they are currently valued at $25 billion, right? And they're expanding to Mexico, obviously, because the opportunity, I mean, Brazil and Mexico are two of the biggest countries in LATAM. with the largest population, obviously. So I'd say it's definitely worth it, and being able to provide even the debit account, and then start educating them and providing other financial solutions will definitely expand sort of the solutions that someone like Nubank currently offers, right? Yes, the debit account is just the entryway and a way for them to experience the traditional financial experience. I mean, when you look at Mexico, most of transactions are done with cash, right? I think it's over 90% of business transactions is done in cash, right? And right now with COVID, obviously cash represents an additional risk, right? So there's been this massive digital adoption into tech solutions that sort of minimize the risk of getting COVID, right? So yes, COVID has had obviously a big downside in globally and in the region, but it's driven this digital adoption into fintechs, e-commerce, even healthcare. Telemedicine is right now an interesting space to look at. So yeah, it's worth looking at how technology has an impact on all of these different businesses.
Oh, I agree. And it's another great point you made is that you've got a high number of users that are transacting in currency and cash versus using digital credit cards, loan dollars, whatever that might be. And with that high transaction, now you're shifting that model again. So you're pushing people to start using more digital transfers, more digital means to do something. In Canada, I think 2-3 years ago, I did an assessment on cash to credit card. And they have been making big push over the last 5 years to credit card and Interact, massive. And it was probably sitting at about 40% were still using cash. Today, it's probably down to 5%. And I'm assuming that 5% is just non-traceable. And that's probably the reason for it, because most people don't care anymore. They're just like transact, touch, and go, right? So I think the pandemic has helped elevate that process. Now, when you're going into that 50% of people that are unbankable, and there's probably 10% that are in Canada, whatever that number is, and in North America, it's probably higher too, is that there's a lot of transactions that are happening in smaller SMEs, and cash is the only way to make that transfer because they don't want to pay for the system because they lose profit, and they're surviving off the dollars that they make in that transaction. So there's probably going to be some good solutions that can offer that value. And I think from the viewership side of what we're doing is really trying to explore and understand, like, hey, there's some opportunities here that are in this market and it's not being filled yet. So there is potential for other fintechs, blockchain events to start doing something in Mexico. And what would be that process that you would recommend if it's always, I find companies that operate in a country like Mexico tend to operate and then go other places. They all want to tackle the market in America without tackling their own market. And then people that are in America, they want to tackle their market in America because it's so massive. And then eventually in a few years, they will start to go out to other regions. But I find that there's never, like, Chile has an amazing center and they try to hold everybody there, but then they're all going somewhere else right away because they don't feel the market's there. And how do you get people to stay in your market and operate it? Because I think it's actually really smart to stay in Mexico. The amount of people there and the amount of transactions is massive. So how do you get these businesses to, one, stay and operate, but two, build in long-term plans, even if they are a North American company?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I'd say in Latin America, like you said, Chile, for instance, the population there is what, probably around 10 million. Mexico, we are 120 million, right? So 12 times the size of Chile. So what we've seen in some of these Spanish-speaking Latin countries is once they prove their business model locally, they tend to expand to other Latin countries. Mexico being the biggest is obviously their naturally their second choice. So, and we've seen some great successes in the region, like Rappi from Colombia, right? Which is right now a unicorn. They got investment from SoftBank, but I'd say their growth actually came from tackling the Mexican market, right? So this, market dynamics of, LATAM countries expanding to other regions, obviously Mexico being a huge player there, is because of the market opportunity, right? And when it comes from Mexico to other countries, it's, the culturality, the similarities between Spanish-speaking LATAM are so similar, obviously the language, that you could see the entire region as a whole, right? Brazil is a monster that it's a little different, but outside of Brazil, I mean, you could look at LATAM, Spanish-speaking LATAM as an entire market opportunity. And that's why some of these Mexican startups that, sort of prove their business locally, they want to start expanding to some of these tech hubs like Colombia, Chile, Peru, so it's an interesting dynamic there. And the closeness of Mexico with the US also represents sort of an entryway into the US market. I mean, the LATAM population in the US is huge, and it's only continuing to grow, right? So being able to, provide value to, LATAM roots of people living in the US with Latin American backgrounds could eventually provide an entryway into the US market, which, like you said, I mean, it's one of the biggest in the world, right? So this market dynamics are interesting, and that's why we've seen some of these startups go that way.
No, it makes sense. And it sounds like it's a very exciting time in Mexico, and that startups around the world, and including investors, need to start looking at this market more, because it is a really large market, and it's starting to digitize and pick up and move pretty quick.
Yeah, and we've started to see, international VCs and investors tapping into LATAM, but it's still a very nascent ecosystem. I mean, the VC landscape in Mexico and Spanish-speaking LATAM is very small right now. So there is a huge, opportunity to continue funding innovation, entrepreneurship, and at the earliest stages, right? So yeah, it's definitely an opportunity for some of these large institutional players to look at the Latin American opportunity.
I love it. One other, I guess, just before we go into the rapid fire questions, I have one more kind of bigger question, and that is, through the time that you've been working in across the networks that you've been involved in, of course, in the investment side, the capital side, have you come across any real exciting stories of just one of those heartfelt stories of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and it really blew your mind how this company just went from nothing to heroes, or something along those lines that just blew you away on what it takes? I always like to find that one story that just blows your mind, that you couldn't believe happened, and it was amazing to see.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot in LATAM. But I mean, one that recently comes to mind is a company called Albo here in Mexico. It's a neobank. They've been in the market for less than 5 years, and they just raised a $42 million round, one of the biggest Series A round in Mexico. And when you listen to the founder, Angel, he comes from a small state in Mexico, right? So he experienced firsthand, obviously, this lack of financial inclusion, and he started building a solution around that. And now Albo is one of the leading neobanks in Mexico. And you listen to some of these entrepreneurs and their stories about how they've experienced firsthand all the problems, and how they decided to tackle that opportunity to build a solution around that. And it's there are a lot of cases like this, but that's one that comes to mind. But yeah, it's the I'd say the beauty of a country like Mexico. You know, you have such diverse population, right? From Carlos Slim being one of the richest guys in the world to, you know, people living in pretty much slums, right? So you're able to get a first-hand experience on all of the opportunities across the entire stack, right? From the popular sector to the middle market to the 1% of the 1%, right? So this, you know, dynamics across Mexico and Latam as a whole, you'll find a lot of these exciting experiences from entrepreneurs all around.
No, that's awesome. No, it's a good story. And I think if I remember correctly, Carlos Slim actually invests in a lot of startups. Their entity does a lot of investing.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the amount of money he has, I'd be investing across, you know, the entire ecosystem. You know, startups. I mean, obviously he holds one of the biggest companies in Latam as a whole, and but yeah, it's a mentality that started to change, right? Because Carlos Slim is, I think, 80 something years old. So you don't see a lot of people this age investing at the early stages, right? Yep. So it's, I'd say, a family office sort of practice that they've been applying in the ecosystem, and they've started to, you know, invest across the entire stack. So yeah.
For sure. Well, I know there's a really good ecosystem in Chihuahua, Mexico, because I spent some time there going to, I spoke at a pitch event in a LATAM investment community. So shout out to the peeps in Chihuahua because it was pretty awesome to be there. But yeah, I love it. So Carlos, we're going to jump into the rapid fire questions.
Ready, man.
All right. So first question, how did you get started in investing in startups?
So the first, you know, angel investment that I made was probably around 10 years ago. I had a friend come to me and tell me about this e-commerce opportunity to import goods from China, right? So we had a common friend that was living in China at the time, and he was telling us about, you know, all the innovation going on there, how cheap the products were, how an enormous opportunity we represent to, you know, import all of these products to Mexico and start selling them here. So that was the first time and the decision was in a day, pretty much, right? And it was a brief experience. I mean, we had some great returns, but at the time we didn't have any of us like specifically focused on running the business. You know, one of the early learnings that we have as entrepreneurs. So we decided to close the shop, but that was the first time, you know, I sort of came into this space and never looked back. Man.
I love it. That's awesome. What's your favorite part of investing?
My favorite part is, you know, getting to know people, learning about new business ideas, new technologies, new solutions. You know, being able to learn something new every day is definitely one of the exciting parts of, you know, being in the investment side of the table.
I like it. How many companies do you invest in per year?
So right now our target is to invest in around 5 companies per year. So have a portfolio of around 15 companies for the fund one. Yeah.
And that the fund one is going to be 10 million, correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's our target fund size right now.
Okay, good. Any specific verticals you're going to focus on? I know the answer, but we'll re-emphasize it one more time.
Yeah, obviously, given our expertise, right now our focus is fintech, which encompasses different business verticals, like I was saying. But yeah, that's where, you know, we're able to add more value to the entrepreneurs that we work. You know, our goal is to bring a hands-on approach, you know, through our experience as operators, entrepreneurs in the fintech space, and investors. So yeah, that's our current focus right now.
I love it. Is there any requirements that you need before you make it a commitment on the due diligence side? From, it could be anything, like what's the specific thing that you really look for to make sure you make that investment outside of it being your buddy? What's the thing you look for the most?
Yeah, we try to look, past the traditional due diligence sort of format. So we obviously look at, the team, the market opportunity, the business timing. Obviously, I mean, if you came out with a solution like a Netflix in 2000, timing wasn't great, right? So that's one. The scalability, obviously, of the business, the technology stack for us is very important. The key differentiators, obviously, of the team and the startup. Those are some of the key components that we try to focus on initially. I mean, part of our thesis is to invest at the seed stage. So obviously, a lot of the traditional, I'd say, due diligence materials are not there yet. So we try to focus on others fundamentals.
Okay. And you have a timeline for investment from the first conversation to the investment?
Yeah, we try to be as agile as possible. I mean, depending obviously on how long we've known the entrepreneurs or the opportunity, we try to be as agile between 2 and 8 weeks right now.
Okay, perfect. Is there anything else that will help you align? You mentioned the team. Is there a focus on product, service, CEO? Like, are those also important, or you just want a rock star team and you're willing to go with that?
Yeah, it's obviously the problem that they're trying to tackle, the solution, their go-to-market strategies, the monetization of the business, obviously something that we look at. But yeah, it's a combination, how crowded the space is, who your competitors are, how you plan on differentiating or tackling the problem that they're trying to solve differently, right? So yeah, it's a combination of different factors right now.
Okay, do you look to lead rounds?
At the seed stage, yeah. So I mean, the investment dynamics in the region are a little bit different. So to give you an idea, our investment thesis is to invest at the seed stage tickets from $50,000 up to $250,000. That's the stage that we're comfortable leading, and co-invest at early stage and early growth tickets ranging from 500 up to $1 million.
Perfect. Do you have preferred terms? So pref shares, common shares?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, obviously, safes and convertible notes at the seed stage are a common practice. But we do like to, when we do equity investments, have preferred shares with traditionally, pro rata rights, and depending on the opportunity and how we're able to add value, have a board seat as well.
I like it. No, that's good. And are you looking to do follow-on investments, and what percentage of that would be follow-on?
Yeah, so our strategy is a 50% follow-on strategy. So if we invest $250,000 at the seed stage, we'll usually reserve $250,000 for the next stage. Yeah, that's currently our reserve strategy.
Love it. Okay, well, outside that, I think you've hammered home all of the questions I have on the quick snapshot, I guess, questions. And the last thing that I want to kind of push into is something more on the personal side. So, what is your favorite sports team?
Any sport?
Any sport, anything, just favorite sports team.
Necaxa. Necaxa is a soccer, we'll call it football, obviously, team here in Mexico. That's my favorite team right now.
Okay.
Other sports, the NFL, I'm a huge fan. Patriots, obviously, I lived in Boston, so they're my go-to team right now.
No, they're okay too. They're doing all right. So on the football side, I just have to ask. So the team, what league are they in?
The Mexican League.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've seen them. When I was there, I went and catch games. I go catch games all over the world. Wherever I can, I jump in and watch a game. So
Necaxa was the team of the 90s decade. So right now we're trying to have a comeback.
Okay.
We had a bit of a tough last couple of decades, but it's
Sounds like it. Yeah.
yeah,
All right. Okay. That's not a bad thing. Means you got some room to grow.
exactly. Uh,
Did they come into
like most startups, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Were they, I'm trying to remember, but a couple years ago, they were in the CONCACAF Cup or something, or TFC played them. Was that, they were part of the Mexico League. I don't know if it would have been them, probably not, but
I don't know, man.
there was a game that was played. I went and saw it, and it was when TFC was really bad, which is our football club.
The uniform is white and red with lightning. So
Okay. I'm going to look them up. I'm going to look them up.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool.
Just Google Mexico's 90s team. You'll see Necaxa there for sure.
It's rare to be being referenced that your favorite team is from the 90s, that it's trying to make a comeback. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
I mean, the two most common are America and Chivas, right?
Yeah, I know them. Yeah, of course.
The two biggest. Pumas is also big in Mexico City.
I think Chivas is the one that came to Toronto and played.
Yeah, I think they were. Tigres was just in the club World Cup playing against what was it? I forgot against who they played. But so Tigres is from the northern part of Mexico. They are currently one of the best teams in Mexico. But yeah, we have a lot of teams.
Yeah, and they've got good soccer. I'm a big fan. Big fan. Good soccer.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Favorite movie, and what character would you play in the movie?
Tough question, man. But I'm a big fan of Interstellar.
Interstellar?
Yeah, I love Interstellar. I love the entire concept, you know, of space travel and you know, different you know, time concepts, everything. And which character, obviously, Matthew McConaughey's role in there.
You know, what's interesting is that, and I have to go back to my notes, but I think you're the third person that I've interviewed that has liked that movie.
Really?
Of all movies, you're like the third person, which is, it must be that this must be, and I remember watching this movie.
Yeah,
obviously, yeah, I've seen it. But it's had such an impact. I didn't think, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many movies out of there, and out of like 75 people, 3 of them all picked Interstellar. So that's pretty incredible.
So what's yours?
Oh man, I've never been asked. So you're the first one, and I've always been planning to. I'm like, okay, man, if somebody ever asked me, I should probably have what is my favorite movie? Like, I'm a huge Star Trek and Jedi and all of those movies, and I like a bunch of movies, right? And one of them, and I'm just trying to remember the name right now, so it's totally gonna and I literally was trying to practice this beforehand, because I'm like, don't get on the spot, because you're on the spot, you're gonna screw it up, because you're gonna be all nervous. It was what I really liked about it. It was the piano one, where the guy's learning to play, he's playing the piano, and his teacher's like all over him.
Piano or the drums?
No, it's the.
Isn't it? Forgot the name. But it's not. It's got nothing to do with Star Trek, Star Wars, and that sort of genre, man.
No, it was more of the reason why I like this movie, and I picked the character, and I'm going to remember this after we're done talking. It was the drive and the impact that the musician went through, but he never settled to not want to be the best. And he worked so hard. And even though he took a beating from the coach or from the teacher, and it would look like complete abuse of how this person went through it, but in the musician's mind couldn't see that it was abuse, just saw the fact that he had a goal, and that his goal was the most important thing, and he was going to take whatever information he had to do to get there. So I don't know why I can't think of this movie, and it's going to come to me after. So, and maybe it was
piano, right? So it's not Whiplash.
Whiplash. That's the one. It was it's the drums. Yes.
He's a drummer. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I was thinking piano.
I don't know why I was thinking piano, but it's
yeah, I love
drummer,
it.
Whiplash.
Movie, yeah.
Yeah. So I like that. One, I love the movie, but two, I just the character of the guy on the drums, just what he went through and how he went through it.
Yeah.
And literally like a week ago, I was thinking about this and I'm like, someone's going to ask me this question and I better be able to answer it. And then this one popped in my head. So I'm like, oh, that's the one. I like that one. So, and the reason why I do this, and I mentioned this in when I do the chats, is because it reflects a lot of the personality of the person. When they can figure out a character that matches who they are. I learned so much about it. So if I haven't seen the movie, I go and watch the movie and I'm like impressed. I was talking with a guy today, JJ out of the US. And when we were talking, I said, I tell your story all the time. Because when I asked him, it might've been the first show I asked him. And he said, Yoda. And I was like, what? You'd play Yoda? I'm like, you look more like one of the other characters, and he's like, no man, Yoda. And I was like, I love it. So today when we had a call, on the screen behind him, he had Yoda on the screen. So I thought that was pretty awesome. I was like, Yoda, brilliant. So yeah, I think it really depicts a lot of the character that you kind of believe in yourself. And what it does for me is it allows me to match up your personality to the type of character. And which I love. If that everybody is Interstellar and they're all Matthew McConaughey, then this is going to be easy to understand how everybody is. So I won't have to remember anything. I'll be like, everybody's a Matthew. Done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love
it's
it.
an interesting exercise, man. But I mean, there are a lot of great movies out there. So if I told you, that my favorite movie was The Lion King, and I wanted to play Simba, I mean, then you'd think differently of me, right?
Well, I might think that, no, at the end you came through. So I'll say that you might be a bit of a shark and a bit of a bad guy at the beginning, but at the end you came through and you helped out. So I guess there's a win in there in the end, but we got to wait for it.
Exactly.
Well, either way, Carlos, it was a pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation. We learned a lot about the background, the banking and everything else and how you guys are focused and how the fund's working. Very exciting. You're laying new ground in Mexico with this, and we wish you all the success. I know we're going to get to chat more. Hopefully, we'll see you on the 25th. And in the fashion of our show, we like to give you the last word. So anything you want to share to other investors or to entrepreneurs, over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. It was a great time, Jeffrey, getting a chance to do this. We're always looking to connect with, people in the space. If you're not looking at Latin America, I'd encourage you. Obviously, the market opportunity, the dynamics are there, and there's a huge opportunity to continue funding in the region. And feel free to reach out, and we're always looking to explore like this, opportunities to meet people from different parts of the world and find opportunities to collaborate in this ecosystem.
I love it. Well, Well, we get this blasted out there. Hopefully we can help make lots of new connections and get those conversations going. So again, Carlos, thank you very much. And we'll be in touch and we'll send you the video once we push it all out. We started putting them on the podcast channels. That'll take a little bit longer because Supporters Fund website, they're all loading in, and then the other side, it takes a bit longer. So it's all about releasing content in a nice sequence. So we'll keep you posted, and we look forward to chatting again.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
All right.
Bye.
Have a great day. Okay, that was brilliant. That was a lot of fun. And I can't believe I couldn't remember the name of Whiplash and that he was not playing the piano, that he was playing the drums. One of those days, I guess. But either way, it was awesome to chat with him and Carlos' background, really exploring that side of fintech and diving into the past experience of through the banking systems and understanding that and how much that's going to make a difference in his drive. I think that being in the blockchain fintech, it's really advanced and they've got a really good structure on the types of companies they're looking for in that seed stage. So pretty exciting. So stay tuned and we'll share that soon. But thank you everybody for joining in.